Hello, good morning and welcome to the United Stand. Hope you're doing well. This is your latest Manchester United news and transfer news, and as ever we've got quite a lot to get through today. Dressing room bust-ups, potential transfers, what's going to happen with the Premier League. But we're going to start off with Jack Grealish. A couple of interesting bits of information in relation to Grealish this morning that somewhat go oppose what we've sort of been discussing on this channel for the last couple of weeks. So I'll give you the news, that's what we're here to do. Grealish has actually done a Q&A on Instagram talking about he'd like to go and play in Spain or in America in the future. Now, look, I think Grealish now or never is very, very true. I don't think it's because he thinks he might play in Spain or America. I've heard a lot of players say they want to play in various places throughout their career and they never actually end up doing it. Grealish for United wouldn't be... I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, we've got to go and sign him now because if we don't, he wants to play in America and Spain. If he wants to play in Spain, we shouldn't sign him anyway because we want a player that's going to be here for 7-8 years. He's 24. We want his prime years at Manchester United. If he wants to go and play in the MLS when he's 32, that's fine. If he's got aspirations of playing in Spain, he's going to want to do that when he's 27, 28, and that's 3 or 4 years at United. That's not long enough. So I'm not worried about that at all. But I do think it is now or never with Jack Grealish. Samuel Luckhurst was on the Manchester Evening News, has released like one of these voice things where he's talking about the latest transfer news for Grealish and basically reiterating what they've been saying for a while, that Manchester United were trying to get an early deal done with Grealish and Villa in February because they had a fear that, you know, the price would go up with the Euros and qualifying it's not qualifying England internationals in March, which obviously never happens now, but United were trying to get a deal done. Obviously that can't be done at the moment. Villa didn't want to get that deal done at the time, but there are no deals to be done at the moment because players and clubs, whether it's United with Pogba or Sancho at Dortmund or Grealish at Villa or whoever, clubs are not in a situation to sit down with players and say, yeah, let's sort out an exit from the club. Because what if everything goes back to normal very quickly and you undervalue a player? Or what if everything gets worse and you overvalue a player? So teams can't really do this at the moment. But what Manchester Evening News are saying is that Manchester United will be eager to get a deal done for Grealish after this is all over and they can talk to him, which I find interesting and goes against what I was told a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Sancho and we were talking about Grealish, that the Grealish deal is totally dependent on Pogba. If Pogba stays, United will not sign Grealish. Now, look, I would like a scenario where we sign Sancho, we keep Pogba and we sign Grealish. I really would like that. I would like us to sign a striker as well because keeping someone like Pogba and adding in a Grealish and a striker makes us a lot stronger than it does without Pogba. But this talk that United will go in for Grealish once all this is settled down with the pandemic and football comes back and also keep Pogba, I just don't see that. I really don't. But I do believe and I do agree that it is now or never with Grealish. I think he will leave Aston Villa this summer and I think that if we don't get him, somebody else obviously will. So how much do United want Grealish? And look, as the article says on the Manchester Evening News and as we've discussed here, United, Grealish, Maddison, there's an obvious reason we're going for Grealish. The reality is there's not a massive amount of difference between the two players. However, Grealish is a lot cheaper. And that is why United will go for him. And I don't normally agree with that either. I wouldn't normally say, well, you go for the cheaper option isn't the way that you improve. But United have a number of areas they need to improve on. And if you're asking me whether I want to spend 80 million on Maddison and maybe miss out on a Sancho, no, I don't. I want to get Sancho over the line. And whoever comes in second is interesting. But you know, the priority is Sancho and Maddison would be way too expensive. But I'll stick to my guns on this one. I don't think United will sign Grealish unless Pogba goes. So let's see how that develops. But I do believe that Grealish will go this summer or whenever the transfer window opens. And it'll be, whether it's going to be United or not, we'll have to see. But I think it is now or never with Grealish. And I think Grealish has got to go now for his own career. I think that often gets forgotten. You talk about United's wants, you talk about Villa's wants. What about Jack Grealish's wants? He's done everything he can do at Villa. Staying there for another year, whether it's in the Championship or a relegation battle, what does that do for a player who is entering his prime years? He's got to go. He's got to go. Whether he'll come to United, I think, depends on Pogba. Talking about another player that Manchester United may be able to pick up, because he's talking about Grealish for 50 million quid. Interesting story yesterday talking about Liverpool stalling over a £50 million deal for Timo Werner. Now, does that open the door for Manchester United? Well, I think that door's always open. I think Timo Werner's left the door open. I think Werner has spoken about Manchester United as well as a couple of other clubs. So I think that door is open for Timo Werner, and I think he'd be a very good option for United. And I think at £50 million, you've got to question why. I know there's talk of a release clause and all that, but £50 million for a player of Timo Werner's quality. I tell you what, if he was in the Premier League doing what he's done in the Bundesliga, or he was English or British, I think he would be double the price. So he's ridiculously cheap. I think this is why Liverpool will probably get him, because Liverpool seems to be able to get very good players at very good prices. And I think United should be looking to get in on this. But we've also got to be realistic here. We were talking last night about the limit that United want to pay for Sancho and not wanting to go above 90 million. Well, if you pay 90 million for Sancho, and then you pay 50 million for Werner, and you pay 50 million for Grealish, that's 200 million basically, which we know United are not going to spend. And again, it could only be done if Pogba left. So there's a lot of variations, but I'd love United to get Timo Werner. I really would. I think that there are big opportunities this summer, but is there a big wage? Is there a big wage budget? But is there, more importantly, is there a big transfer budget? And the last few years at United would suggest not. We were talking about Director of Football yesterday, and I did see an article about how United had interviewed a number of people for the post. Some of the names were Nemanja Vidic, Rio Ferdinand, Darren Fletcher, and Van der Sar. Now, Van der Sar would be well qualified for the job because of the things he's done at Ajax. But when you look at the other players, Rio and Vidic and Darren Fletcher, and I think even Evra was mentioned, this to me, I mean, that is... I mean, I don't even have the word for it really, because if we'd appointed Rio as director of football, or Vidic or Darren Fletcher, we weren't really appointing a director of football. They're not directors of football. They're just token people who come in and you go, yay! We brought in a legend to work with Ollie. Like, that's not what the vast majority of United fans wanted from a director of football. We wanted somebody we've probably never heard of, who when you hear of them and you look at their track record and you go, well, they've done their job there at Juventus, Atletico, there are people out there, like Bertra I've just named, he would be good. Mitchell, there's a few I know, but there's be a lot more. We wanted a director of football who was actually one of the best director of footballs in the world. We didn't want Vidic or Rio, so we can go, hey, we've got another legend at the club. That's not United fans. I think some United fans would love that, and they'd go, yeah, but it's not really what we were looking at. And so that whole story I read was just like, well, we weren't. If we'd have got one of them, we weren't appointing a director of football anyway. That was just, fan service again, isn't it? Bring somebody in who's going to be popular, who basically hasn't got a clue what they're doing, who can be manipulated by the board. Because Rio Ferdinand, talks a lot of sense. What's his knowledge of being a sporting director or a director of football? None. Absolutely none. Does he go out around scouting players in Romania and Spain and everything like that? No, he watches it on BT. It's not Rio's fault. It's not Vidic's fault. It's not Darren Fletcher's fault. It would have been a really, really token appointment, and it's not. It's just, I'd rather be in the situation we're in where we haven't appointed one, because I think appointing one of them would have been just like not appointing one anyway. And again, why would a club like Manchester United, who are trying to close the gap on Liverpool, Man City, Real Madrid, Barcelona, whoever, why would we, when we're trying to close a gap, put yet another person into a very important position who's learning on the job with no experience? It defies logic if we'd have done that. So, if we were going to get a director of football, it needed to be somebody probably most of us have never heard of. But when you look at them, you look at the CV and go, yeah, that's exactly what specialists for specialist positions is what you need. Now, there was a story coming out. I couldn't really find. I mean, this is ridiculous. I actually saw it on a link for the Daily Star, but then they quoted Andy Mitten, who does the United fanzine and a podcast for the Athletic, basically saying that Alexis Sanchez had a training ground bust-up with Mason Greenwood last summer, and this was the reason that Ollie basically sent him off to Inter Milan. I've heard a totally different story, and I know a lot of people who are quite close to United know a different story to this. I'm not disputing there was a training ground bust-up between Mason Greenwood and Alexis Sanchez, but for anybody who's done any training or watched football for any period of time, when professional footballers are training, they don't just all high-five as they skin each other and put a tackle in. If there are scuffles on a football pitch, there are scuffles on a training pitch. It's just, in fact, as a coach, you want to see your players doing that. It's something that goes back to the days of Roy Keane and Cantona, and training was like everyone wanted to win in training because that's the mentality you've got. And when you've got a load of people who want to win, tackles go in, competitive element comes in, and you get training ground bust-ups. They're not, the press love them because they want to turn them into something bigger than they are. But the reality is players fall out all the time in coaching and training because it's a competitive environment. So I'm not disputing the fact that Mason Greenwood and Alexis Sanchez had a fallout, but I don't believe that that's the reason Alexis Sanchez left Manchester United. I think the reason that Alexis Sanchez left Manchester United is because he went into Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's office and said he didn't want to be here, which is the story that's been floating around for the last 12 months. And there's evidence behind that anyway. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, 2 weeks before Sanchez was going to Inter Milan, said Alexi will be part of this season. I don't think it was the time where he said he'd prove every wrong, but he definitely said that he'll be part of this season. And then Alexis Sanchez 2 weeks later goes to Inter Milan. Now you could say, well, that's because of the bust-up between Mason Greenwood and Alexis Sanchez. But do you think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, having just lost Lukaku last summer, went, you know what, you fell out with a young striker, I'm going to get rid of you as well? He wouldn't have done that. He would have tried to calm it down. He would have tried to keep both of them, but he definitely would have tried to keep Sanchez, and that was his plan. The reality is Sanchez didn't get on with everybody at the club, was a bit of a loner. There was all those stories about him eating his breakfast on his own, and he didn't want to be at Manchester United. And he made that very clear to Solskjaer, and Solskjaer, quite rightly, had to let him go. So I don't believe that there was, as much as it makes for a great story, because we all love Mason Greenwood, Ollie kicked Sanchez out to keep Greenwood. It would have been a stupid thing to do. Even I would say that would have been a stupid thing to do because we needed strikers and we just lost Lukaku and not replaced him. So you wouldn't do that. You would have calmed it down and you would have kept him. And the reality is the reason we didn't keep him is because he was a disruptive element in the club who didn't want to be there, and he forced it as much as anybody. So that's the situation with Sanchez. What else? Madrid Deportivo outlet in Spain are reporting that Madrid are preparing a bid for Paul Pogba. I mean, it wouldn't be a day without talking about Paul Pogba, would it? But however, there was an interesting story coming out of Calcio Mercato talking about Milinkovic of Lazio, saying that Manchester United are getting frustrated by Lazio because they want to sign Milinkovic-Savic, but the price won't adjust. Now, I don't believe this story. I don't think Manchester United are looking at Milinkovic-Savic at all, but I do believe that there is a frustration in the market at the moment because, well, it's an obvious frustration, isn't it? That clubs cannot do deals because they cannot communicate with players or clubs to a satisfactory conclusion. You can talk to players through their agents. We know that Man United have been talking to Sancho, but you can't further the deal with Dortmund because Dortmund won't sit down and do it, because Dortmund, like United, won't sit down and do it with Pogba, because you don't know what the future's going to be. So it is a frustrating time for Manchester United and other clubs who want to sort of prepare deals that they can't progress like they normally would. And I do agree with that. But with Milinkovic-Savic, it's just not on the agenda for Manchester United. I mean, good player, had a very good season for Lazio, but he's not on the agenda. He's not on the agenda for a lot of reasons, but primarily, probably because of what they're talking about there. I think we're being used to create a market for Milinkovic-Savic. Just the same as I said last night, I think we're being used, Manchester United, to create a market for Koulibaly. We're not in for Koulibaly. We can't afford to go in for Koulibaly. We can't pay £80 million for Koulibaly when we want a midfielder, a striker, an attacker. And we can't afford to pay £80 million for Milinkovic-Savic when we just go and get Maddison. So we're looking at Grealish, we're not looking at Milinkovic-Savic, but there definitely is a frustration in the market at the moment because how do you progress these deals? You don't. And that's why the next few weeks and months are very interesting in relation to football and whether we get it back on the pitch, but also whether we can get discussions going on between clubs who at the moment just don't know what to do because they don't know how much money they're going to lose or how much they're going to earn over the next few months. Which brings me to the Premier League and the return of the Premier League. Another story coming out of that today that they will not, they'll play 45-minute games or half an hour halves. And it's just getting a bit silly now. And I think it's getting silly for the same reason I said last night. People or clubs or people in clubs are starting to manipulate this situation to benefit themselves. Oh, we'll play if there's no relegation. Oh, we'll play half an hour games. Look, if we're playing football behind closed doors with no fans, you do it at neutral grounds and you do 90-minute games. That's what you do. You don't start. You can't have 29 games where it's 90 minutes and then have 9 games where it's half an hour. You've got to do it properly or you don't do it at all. And I think a lot of this is the whole problem. Greed, and different motives will cause problems for this. And the Premier League need to be tough on it. They need to say, look, we're doing it this way. It's going to be in neutral grounds. It's going to be 90-minute games. And we're going to try and do it that way. And if it doesn't work, we won't do it at all. And if we don't do it at all, we're going to relegate... No, I'm not going to say that. We'll just have to cancel the whole thing. Which is what I think some clubs down the bottom of the Premier League want to happen. They want it to be cancelled because then they'll get another year in the Premier League, which, to be honest with you, leaves a bad taste in the mouth. I'm sure it does for Liverpool fans, but it leaves a bad taste in the mouth as well if these clubs are being obstructive because they... Not for safety concerns, for money concerns. And they can hide behind the safety stuff, but the reality is there'll be clubs that are facing relegation who totally and utterly want the league to be cancelled so they get another year in the Premier League. And look, people, I can understand that, but it takes strong leadership from the Premier League to say, no, we're not going to be bullied or moved around by you lot. We'll relegate you anyway, or something like that. Probably a little bit harsh. Their lawyers might be interested in that one. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Smash a like on the video. We've got the Flex and Rant show coming up live at 1 o'clock, and I'll be back at 8 o'clock tonight. I'll speak to you all soon. Subscribe, smash a like, and have a good day.